Assalamu alaikum. Now we continue with basic Arabic grammar. This is the famous text, the name of it, متن الآجرومية. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الكلام هو اللفظ المركب المفيد بالوضع، وأقسامه ثلاثة: اسم وفعل وحرف جاء لمعنى. فالاسم يعرف بالخفض والتنوين ودخول الألف واللام، وحروف الخفض وهي من وإلى وعن وعلى وفي ورب والباء والكاف واللام، وحروف القسم وهي الواو والباء والتاء. So these are the distinguishing marks for nouns we discussed in the previous videos. Today, inshallah, we start with verbs, the distinguishing marks for verbs. And here, that's where the text starts with that. So it says here, والفعل يعرف بقد والسين وسوف وتاء التأنيث الساكنة، والحرف ما لا يصلح معه دليل الاسم ولا دليل الفعل. Here you have the verb is known by يعرف بقد. This قد here, B, we said a meaning of B is instrumental, with, by. They cut the bread with a knife, by a knife, or using a knife. It's one of the meanings for B is this sense is you do it with. So you recognize the verb be with or by this word here, قد. Another word is sin, سوف, and the unmoving feminizing ta. For today we will cover this here, قد, and I will introduce different text. It's just an introduction. It's an advanced level, second level, but just to introduce to it, to give you an idea what resources you might have if you need them when you advance in your studies. Just like I did last time, I introduced the Haywood 65 book about Arabic grammar. Now I will introduce an Arabic text. This text here is called القواعد الأساسية للغة العربية, the basic rules for the Arabic language. And here it says حسب منهج متن الألفية لابن مالك, according to the methodology of the text or the main body of the Alfiya. Al-Alfiya is a poem of 1,000 verses. Each verse contains a law in grammar or a few laws, depending how he needed to set up that these verses. So if you memorize the poem, that's how they used to do them in all times. You know most of the grammar rules. But of course, you spend the time after that by studying these rules. After however many years or months you study, just by remembering the verse in the poem, you refresh your understanding of these laws. So he's saying here he's following that methodology, but this book is not designed as a poem. It explains that poem. Also here says خلاصة الشراح لابن هشام وابن عقيل والأشموني. These are three grammarians. They explained this poem and wrote books about it. So he's using the summary of these three as an aid in his book, authored by Sayyid Ahmad al-Hashimi. This is the author of this book. This is his job. He was the principal or manager of the schools for King Fuad. This is a 90 years old book. It explains this very famous poem. It's famous because it covers the very basics. If you major in Arabic language, it's a second level or intermediate level. course, it's more than one needs to learn the language, but if you need more details, break up, or support your arguments, or find a dependable source to understand, or at least point it out to someone who speaks Arabic, he can help you with it. So this is just an introduction to it. I will use some examples from it to explain what we are studying today, which is this letter قد. Here you have the same thing. Of course, this is more detailed. As I said, the text we are studying is very basic, but it's mostly, that's all you need for speaking or reading or learning the language. This here is more detailed. It helps you if you read text and books, if you stop at different changes that you did not study in the basics. This will help you navigate your way through it if you want to go deeper into the language. So here he's pointing out the feminizing nu or an, nunun niswa. This is used between all three, the past, the present, and the imperative or the command. Like when you say run, eat as a command or a request. Present tense mudara, and maldi is the past tense. He's now indicating what are the marks that all these three share. So this and the nuswa goes with the three of those: past, present, and imperative. Qad this is what we're studying here now. In the text we are studying, he's only pointing out what the verb mark is. So he used this because it's shared between different verbs. So you will only see this before a verb. You will never see this before a noun. So if you see this, you are looking at the word after it is a verb. It could be a past or present. He says qad, this is one of the marks. Then these we'll get to later. Focus on the one thing that we will learn, this qad here. We will get to the other two marks later. So this qad here is a distinguishing mark that is shared between past and present. The imperative will never have this qad. That's the difference between this mark here. Also, we'll cover this later, but for now we focus on qad. And here also he uses another sign. So you can, this is a detailed text. I discussed before this word anaitu, which includes the letters that takes a past tense verb and turn it into a present tense. So these are like mnemonics. If you remember this word, you remember all the letters. So a is for the speaker, na is for the speaker, ya is for the third person, ta is for first and second person. This is another setup, atain or na'ti. All these have meanings to them. So if you remember the word, you remember all the letters. So I go with this anaitu to remember them. Now here he goes in detail with this qad, the word we are studying. So he explains the meaning of it when it's attached to the past, and the meaning of it when it's attached to the present tense. Here he says you have two meanings for it, tahqiq wa taqrib, indicating that the matter has established, or the verb is completed or established. So he says here, uses a verse from the Quran, says قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. The believers have succeeded. This qad indicates that it's happened, it's established, accomplished in that sense. Another meaning it will give is taqrib, meaning it's close. They use this verb a lot. قد قامت الصلاة. The prayer is established. This they say just before the prayer starts. When they call for prayer together, they say قد قامت, as if it's already started. So this indicates it's very near. You can say قد غابت الشمس. Just before the sun sets, if you say قد غابت الشمس, this indicates it's very close. If it goes with the present, also have two meanings, either indicating it doesn't happen that often, or the opposite. التكثير التقليل والتكثير. التقليل meaning making something less. التكثير means making something more. So if you say قد يصدق الكذوب, a liar might be honest. So it's a possibility, but it doesn't happen that often. So if someone is known as a liar, it's very rare for them to be honest. So that's what قد here when it attached to a present tense. In here, تكثير, قد ينال المجتهد جائزته. Someone who is a hard worker, قد ينال, he will gain or attain his prize. So this something happens often. Hard workers get their prize for their work most of the time. So this meaning it happens a lot more or more than this. So you have قد ينال المجتهد جائزته. So this is the ways of قد. As you see from this explanation, you will not see it that often, but it's one of the main marks. And the one before that I indicated, this anaitu, this is the one that you will need, because you will never see a present tense without one of these letters, a, no, ya, and ti. But as I said before, they never use it as a distinguishing marks, because some verbs, past tense verbs, will have one of these letters as the first letter. So that prevented them from using that as a distinguishing mark. But you can, most of the time, that's what will be the case. So for our purposes, you can use it like that. If you see a verb that has one of these, there is a good chance you're looking at the present tense, but not always, as we will see. I think now I can go to another page just to give you an example of what to expect in these books. You see here also these marks would go through when we discuss present tense verbs and their effects on verbs. I will not go through these, just to give you an idea what to expect. Here another page about definitions, what causes the present to only indicate the future, what causes it to only indicate the present, and when it can work for both present and the future, or what can cause the present to indicate the past by using these letters that you add at the beginning. That's another example. Here distinguishing marks for past tense, only it attached to a past tense, so you can look for these. This here is especially important because these are pronouns that attach to the end of a past tense verb, so it's one of the distinguishing marks for a past tense verb. So in the text we are studying, he's just given you the names in general, and here we will, every time we discuss something, we go through these. So just go to this Arabic collection online and you can search through these. You don't have to use them right away, but when we advance, if you start to look for answer to questions you have, even if you don't know how to read it or find it, just by pointing out the text to someone who does, you have all the information you need in the text. Since these are designed specifically for students learning, you don't miss a piece of information here and there, and if they're basic, they cover the basics. If they're more detailed, you get more detail, and so on. So that's about the value of these texts. This is another page. So now I'll just read text. This text we read last time. I will just read through it. You can pause it and look out for the signs that we used. In this text, it did not have this qad in it. That's why I showed some example of it. As I said, you will not see it that often, but as we go one by one, we covered qad. Next time we cover sa or sawfa, another sign that attaches to the present tense, and only to the present tense, indicating the future. So here it says قاس Charles Dickens كثيرا من البؤس والشقاء وهو طفل، وكان ينام في البرد كقطة مشردة لا تجد لها مأوى، وكثيرا ما بات على الطوى، اختلط بصناع تنقصهم التربية والتهذيب، في أخلاقهم جفاف، وفي طباعهم خشونة، وفي معاملاتهم قسوة. وقد أفادته تلك الأيام التي قضاها في المصنع في حياته المستقبلة، إذ كانت منبعا فياضا لا يغيض معينه ولا تنضب موارده. حينما أراد أن يصور حياة الفقراء والمساكين واليتامى وأبناء السبيل بتلك الصور المحزنة التي جعلت الشعب الإنجليزي وقتئذ يلمس في خزي وخجل ما يعانيه الفقراء من فقر ومتربة وذل وشقاء ومتاعب وصعاب في أعمالهم ومساكنهم ومدارسهم ومستشفياتهم وملاجئهم وسجونهم ومصانعهم. The previous text I read, we did last time. We covered it. Now this is another page from that text. You can go back to the meaning, just saying the difficulties he was able to experience, that he can identify with the poor people in England at that time. And here says their troubles in their works, homes, schools, hospitals, shelters, jails, factories. So this is what this text is about. Notice here I talked about the and in Arabic, this letter, wa, here, wa. So and troubles and difficulties in their works. Notice أعمالي, li. Hum here is the pronoun. We will cover that later, how they attach. They go under that process too. You have here two names that they're attached to each other. That's also idafa. But there is you don't have these lowering on the pronouns, since pronouns, past tense verbs, imperative verbs, they have fixed movements. Their movements do not change depending on their position. They go under changes if something is attached to them. So that's a different lesson. So for now, you will notice if I say في أعمالهم, you don't see an end here, a lowering at the end of this, because these are two names here. This أعمال here, this is works. Hum, so this ha is your pronoun for the third person. This for masculine group. So these are details I will not go too much into, but just if you're wondering why I can't see a lowering here, or when you hear me read it, you can't distinguish that E at the end, that's why. But notice now here the same thing, they can show it. وَمَسَاكِنِهِ. Masakin is houses or dwelling places. Also this ha here and this pronoun again. Ha for third person, for masculine plural. So you have here I, masakini, wa madarisi. You see that they showed this I here because this is a noun, the first noun here. Then this noun is identifying its idafa. This is like of, the school of them, the houses of them, the works or the jobs of them. But they're attached, pronouns attached to the nouns. So now I just pointed that out for you. So if you're looking for that E, that's their E there. And here they did not show it. Their hospital مستشفياتي هم ملاجئ shelters ملاجئي سجوني مصانعي. Then they add the identifying pronoun or this إضافة that we discussed in the last video. So that's another example of it. This wa here between them is your and. So if you're in English you say and, this is the wa here. Now it's functioning as and also it has other function. It has an influence on the nouns, because fi here caused this noun to have that e ending. But if you're wondering what caused these to have this e, this wa. When you add this wa, it follows this here, because it's as if you're saying في أعمالهم في مساكنهم في مدارسهم. Instead of saying في all the time, if you use the wa and this is implied, and since this is implied, this movement is there. As I said, not everything I say you should take as the main lesson, but as I will discuss things as I come across it. This way, when we come to the lesson that's specifically discussed these things, you have some familiarity with it. So here says بعد حين قيض الله لتلك الأسرة من ينقذ عميدها من السجن ويؤدي ما عليه من الدين. Also, I always like to point out, when you read a text with diacritics, if you read it out loud, notice you have to pause, either to take a breath or to where the sentence ends. Of course, at the beginning you might not be able to recognize that, but if you do that, notice how when you stop, you lose the movement. So that's when you listen to news broadcast and people talking in the MSA or classical Arabic, you start, where are the movements? I learned that you have an E at the end. I learned you have an U at the end. When you pause at the end, you lose these movements, except for sometimes the is added or extended. But usually you don't hear it. So it's good to be aware of that. And when you do read the text out loud, make sure when you stop, do that yourself. When you do that, you'll get used to it. When you complete the sentence, that movement is your vowel that facilitate moving from one word to another. See, when I say لتلك الأسرة becomes two silent letters if I stop. But when we continue, say لتلك الأسرة, that's the job of vowels in the language. Facilitate the movement from one letter to another. In this case, from one word to another. So just be aware of that. وبذا أتاحت الفرصة لتشارلز أن يعود إلى حياة الدرس والتحصيل، وأدخل مدرسة لم يجد فيها ما يروي ظمأه ويطفئ غلته. In here it says God gave his family a savior who gave its father, helped his father come out or saved him from jail and pay his debts. This gave Charles the chance to go back to school and learning. And he was entered into a school, but it did not satisfy his thirst for knowledge or quell his desire. So he was disappointed. فانهارت صروح آماله وأخذ يعتمد على نفسه في القراءة والاطلاع. So he was disappointed and he had to depend on himself for reading and looking at other sources. ولما بلغ من العمر 15 سنة اشتغل كاتبا لدى أحد المحامين، ثم تعلم فن الاختزال ليتمكن من أن يكتب لإحدى الصحفي ما يلقى في مجلس النواب من خطب وما يدور فيه من مناقشات. So when he was 15 years old, he worked as a clerk at one of the lawyer's offices. Then he learned short writing, so he would be able to write for a newspaper what is said in the House of Commons and what the discussions in it. So he reported on the House of Commons and started at the age of 15 to do that. وبعد عامين اشتغل بالصحافة وأخذ يجوب القرى ويختلط بالفلاحين ويكتب مذكرات عما يشاهد ويرى في الريف ويبعثها إلى الصحف. وفي هذه الفترة اكتسب كثيرا من التجارب وعرف كثيرا عن الحياة والأخلاق والعادات. After 2 years he worked in journalism, and he started to travel between villages and mix with the farmers and write his diaries about what he sees in the countryside and send it to the newspapers. In this period, he gained a lot of experiences, and he knew a lot about the life, manners, morals, and customs of the people. Here, this is just a side note explaining some of these words. قيض. This is a good example that even people who speak Arabic, just like in English, some words is not used all the time, like this here verb, past tense. So in text, you could see this side notes explaining what these words are, like as a help for the reader to know these words instead of going for a dictionary. So you will always see something like this. قيض الله فلانا لفلان. He's using this word قيض, explaining what that is. That God facilitated so and so for so and so. That's the sense it's used for, meaning he brought it to him and made him available for him. الغلة, this is the heat of thirst. You remember when I said quelled his desire for learning? This is here, they use this غلة. This is not used all the time. That's why they have this side note explaining what that word in Arabic is. The heat of thirst. So another way of saying quell his thirst. This third word here he indicated. You see this يبعثها here. يرسلها, send it. That's the usage of this word. If the writer thought it needs explanation, they have it here in the side note. Thank you for listening. Next time, inshallah, we cover more about the distinguishing marks for verbs. As I said, the main lesson for this lecture is the qad. This qad here. This is the word you see before verbs. As I said, because it's not, you will not see it in all text, it's not used that often. Just it has to be pointed out. So if you see it before a word, you're guaranteed to be looking at either a past tense or a present tense verb. We will look at other sign next time. Thank you for listening. See you next time. Assalamu alaikum.